a good situation.
Heat 3B of the 2013 Lamb-Weston Columbia Cup.
A tough heat to get them with these
Heat
guys.
3A, excuse me, 5 Graham Trucking, Jimmy Shane.
Over by Tony in turn number 2 from Farmers Exchange.
Well, it is going to be
defending Columbia Cup champion, the defending national champion, the one Oberto, Steve David.
I believe, if I'm doing some calculations here right, aren't we only just a couple hundred points, couple 130 points away from the top spot, which would be Oberto and Shane in the total points?
Yeah, they're very, very close together.
The 9, Red Dot, Les Schwab Tire, Fox Plumbing, John Zimmerman.
And let's check in with Rob Francis. Billy Rob in turn number 3. And you have a helicopter.
And the 21, Brian Perkins, Snoqualmie Casino.
Nice view. It's got some pontoons on it just in case, I guess. In case Jaws shows up or whatever, it can go down and take care of things. But if you remember that little scene from Jaws 2. But, you know, you started reading the Heat lineup, and I thought for a second you were reading the final lineup because with those 3 taking part in this Heat, it's going to make it very tough, as Brad said, for Perkins and also for Greg Hopp to make up any points in this. But I think the only advantage Steve David has so far in points over Jimmy Shane is the dash for the cash. If I remember correctly, they both won their qualifying heats,
well,
didn't they?
yeah, there's no points in the dash for cash, but where he got points was in qualifying, and so there was a difference there. So
it's just about money.
Yeah, there.
Now, speaking of money, we have all boats now that have come out and crossed at speed at the start-finish line.
Yeah, you're still waiting on Greg Hopp.
Okay.
Greg Hopp, I actually turned to a couple of people up here on the tower.
But the interesting thing, though, is Jimmy Shane, who's been the leapfrogger, is now parked in lane number 1, coming down the front stretch really slow.
Got to mix it up.
They seem to be having some trouble on Hopp's boat.
Well, he was bouncing around in that last heat quite a bit.
Well, they didn't get in. They did not put that boat in the water until 3 minutes until the 5-minute gun. And I turned to some people up here and said, "Don't be surprised if we put this thing on a 5-minute delay." So they're at the dock still, and they're scrambling down there. Are you down there by them?
I am. Oh, and it looks like they're pushing the nose away right now.
I see you down there. He's walking right toward the boat. The nose of the 14 is being pushed out to the blue Columbia. Plenty of time here.
Trying to get it lit.
But remember, he's got to go all the way up to the west end and come across start-finish line at speed.
Ooh, hot start out of the back. A lot of flames, but he's got it up and running.
What kind of time do you have, Brad?
What kind of what?
2:11, 2:10.
2:10.
All right. So Jimmy Shane on the slow troll in lane number 1. Now look at Steve David in the Oberto is also moving extremely slow across the Northern Quest start-finish line. And it looks like he's in lane number 2. And then you have Zimmerman in lane number 3 heading down the front stretch. And then Brian Perkins, top end of the course. He's coming at speed across the start-finish line. And still, Greg Hopp is
14, Greg Hopp,
turn 2 right
Mr.
now,
Julio.
where Tony Ott is, and heading up towards Rob Francis in turn number 3. This is an interesting start sequence.
Yeah, watch Greg Hopp. I would expect he'll jump the course here. He'll come around on the and cross start finish line at speed. There he goes. He's going to cut the course. He did not want to tape the extra time to go all the way up to the west end and pay Rob a visit. So we're at 1:24 here. So
now here's the question: is anybody going to let Jimmy Shane really hold on to lane number 1 as we start to see the other boats spool up on the outside?
Well, the man with the answer to that question is Tony, and he's going to have it for us in 10 seconds.
9, 8.
Oberto in lane number 2. Jimmy Shane in
3, 2, 1.
number 4. Everybody looks good, and it will be Jimmy Shane in the 5 taking it out, and Zimmerman coming out hard on lane number 4 and looking very good on the outside.
Well, it's Jimmy Shane right now in lane number 1. Now he's going to have to back off the throttle for the timing to get to the start-finish line, and that's exactly what he does.
Didn't yesterday Steve David win the heat he was in lane 3?
He can do that.
And that boat runs very well.
He's in lane 2 right now as they head to Rob in Avalon Health and Rehab turn number 3.
Well, and Jimmy Shane coasting right now. John Zimmerman on the outside in lane 3. You've got Brian Perkins coming up, and now sweeping up on the outside with some speed is Greg Hopp and the Mr. Julio. And right now, Jimmy Shane in lane 1 approaching the entrance pin. You've got Steve David and the Oberto passing him a little bit on the outside. And these guys are set and ready to run.
Let's get back to the countdown.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. This should be a very clean start. All the boats come around the side of the course. 6. Turn number 5. Jimmy Shane leading as they get to the start-finish line.
2, 1.
They are clean and it's Greg Hopp on the outside with boat speed. Jimmy Shane in lane number 1 seems to be falling back a little bit.
But the race everybody is going to watch is in lane number 1 and 2, and I'm going to tell you what, Jimmy Shane is getting down here in a hurry. He's got about 4 boat lengths on Steve David. Coming to you, Tony.
And he's got that skid fit, and he's bouncing
Oh, and
across the
Perkins
top.
goes through the rooster tail and goes way to the outside, but he's okay.
And he is up and running. He's still outside, and it will be Shane in lane number 1, and he'll take the lead. He's got a rooster tail lead over the Oberto.
Yeah, about a rooster tail. Steve David tries to gain speed on the backstretch in the old boy Oberto. Jimmy Shane in the 5 Graham Trucking leading into turn number 3.
Jimmy Shane approaching the entrance pit here in turn 3. Steve David, both boats, a little rock back and forth, but it looks like Steve David is catching Jimmy Shane a little bit. The red dot caught a tiny bit of air, but came back down. And then to Mr. Julio for on the outside with Brian Perkins bringing up the rear.
Jimmy Shane leading, but look at Steve David in lane number 2. He is gaining ground on Jimmy Shane and the Graham Trucking as they come across the start-finish line. Jimmy Shane a 149.377 for the old boy Oberto. Steve David a 146.153.
14. 1 lap penalty on the 14.
Shane gets down here first again, about the same lead he had last time. It's about 4, maybe 5 boat lengths, Tony, coming to the apex.
Oh, and he's walking across the top of those spots, and he is really working that boat hard. He's trying to stay ahead, but look in the rearview mirror. Here comes number 1, Steve David in the Oberto.
Jimmy Shane lost a little bit of speed at the exit pin of our Farmers Exchange turn number 2, and look at him dancing on the sponsons coming up the backstretch. Jimmy Shane hitting some rough water. Steve David and the old boy Oberto is gaining up the backstretch.
He danced all right, Michael. In fact, enough that Steve David has definitely closed the gap here as we hit the entrance pin on turn number 3. And it's not been as smooth a run for Jimmy Shane as he would have hoped. The red dot, though, a distant third right now as he just hits the entrance pin, followed by the Mr. Julio and then Brian Perkins in the outer lane.
Picture perfect turn by Steve David trying to gain ground on Jimmy Shane, who crosses the start-finish line 149.531. Steve David at 148.760. Down the front stretch, it's Jimmy Shane on the inside, leading Steve David on the old boy Oberto. John Zimmerman in the 9 in third.
Got about 5 boat lengths still. This is going to be it, the white flag lap, Tony.
They're walking across, and it comes out. Jimmy Shane is out in front. He's got a rooster tail lead, but do not count out the National High Points champion and leader, Steve David.
Looks like Steve David is not going to be able to catch him coming up the backstretch. Jimmy Shane with a great run, riding it a little bit loose in the water, coming up to turn number 3 and Rob Francis.
He was dancing again as he came up the backstretch, and Steve David closing again as we get to the entrance pin on turn number 3. Jimmy Shane hits it first, but Steve David only about 2 boat lengths back now.
And it's Jimmy Shane around turn number 4, exit pin in lane number 1. Steve David on the outside appears out of the rooster tail. He was really close to the weight. It's going to be Jimmy Shane across the start-finish line, but only by a half rooster tail or less. Second place goes to Steve David and the old boy Oberto. Third place, John Zimmerman in the 9. That is the Fox Plumbing presents Team Red Dot, powered by Les Schwab. He'll cross the start-finish line. Then you've got Greg Hopp, followed by Greg Hopp, that is, followed by Brian Perkins, coming to wrap up what is a fantastic Heat 3A from Cascade Natural Gas. The duel we were waiting for, and Jimmy Shane at the boat speed and the inside lane to hold off in lane number 2, Steve David and the old boy Oberto.
Well, he